Hi guys, in this series I'll be solving many programming questions from a beginner to an intermediate level, and I'm going to use C++. I'm using the Visual Studio Code, and you'll find a link in the description to download it and how to set it up in order to work with C++. So the first question we're going to solve is this. Write a program which calculates expression n power n, where n is an integer filled by the user. So let's start by displaying a message to the user, enter a number, and let's put an end line. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable called n, and I'll initialize it to 0, and then I'll take the number from the user and store it inside n. Now I'll make another variable called result, and I'll initialize it to 1, and in this variable I will store the n power n. So let's make a for loop that runs from I equals 1 till I is less than or equal n, and I will increment I. Inside this loop I will assign result to result times n. This can be also written as result times equals n. So in this loop, result will be multiplied by n times, because we are running this loop from I equal 1 till I equal n. So in the first iteration, result will be equal to 1 times n, so result is equal to n. In the second iteration, result will be equal to n squared, and in the third iteration, result will be equal to n cubed. And this will continue until the nth iteration, where result will be equal to n power n. So now let's just display result, and let's test the program. So I'm going to enter, let's say 4, and I get 256, which is 4 power 4. We're going to write a program which reads a sequence of real values filled by the user and stops displaying finished when the sum of these values exceeds 100. So let's make first of all a constant integer called max, and let's set it to 100, and let's make an integer n, initialize it to 0. This n will be the input of our user, and let's make another variable called sum and also initialize it to 0. In order to solve this, I'm going to use a do-while loop. This loop will run as long as sum is less than or equal to max. So inside this loop, I will tell the user to enter a number, and I'll follow this by an end line. Now let's take the number from the user and store it inside n. And now let's add n to our sum. So sum plus equals n. This is also written as sum equals sum plus n. Okay, when we exit this loop, we're going here and we're going to see out finished, and that's it. Okay, I'm going to add one thing. Let's display sum at each iteration. So see out sum equals sum followed by an end line, and now let's test our program. Okay, enter a number 5, our sum is 5. Enter another number, let's say 70, 75, 20, 95, and 5, we get 100. Now I'll enter 1, so sum will be 101, and I will no longer be inside the loop. So sum is 101, and we get finished. We have to write a program which reads a sequence of positive integers and shows their multiplication and their sum when we enter a negative number. So first of all, let's make an integer sum initialized to 0 and an integer product, and let's initialize it to 1. So I'm going to use a do-while loop. This loop will work as long as the input of the user is a positive number. So let's say n is positive. Okay, now I'm going to make another variable and initialize it to 0, and this will be the user input, and inside the loop we will see out enter a number followed by an end line, and let's now take n from the user, and sum should be equal to sum plus n, and the product should be equal to product multiplied by n. So I think this is it. Let's see out sum equals sum, and our product is equal to product, and let me add a space here. And now let's just test the program. So enter a number 1 2 3 4 5, and let's now enter a negative number, so the sum and the product should be displayed -1. And as you can see, we have that the sum is 14 and the product is -120. And this is a wrong answer, and I'll show you why. Here, when we are taking n from the user, regardless if it is positive or negative, we're adding it to the sum and multiplying it by the product. This is why we got a wrong answer. So in order to fix this, simply let's add an if statement. If n is negative, we are going to break out of the loop. So for example, if I enter -1, I'm going to break out from the loop, and -1 will not be added to the sum and will not be multiplied by the product. And that's it. Let's just test the program now. Let's enter the same numbers and -1. Now we get the correct answer. Sum is 15 and the product is 120. We're going to write a program which reads a positive integer and shows its strict divisors. Strict divisors means that we want all the divisors without the number itself. So first of all, let's just make an integer n and initialize it to 0. Then let's take n from the user. Let me display a message, enter a number, and now I'm going to start a for loop. So int I equals 1, and I will be less than or equal to n over 2. Then I will increment I. Why I is less than or equal to n over 2? The strict divisors of any number, as I said, are all the numbers without this number itself. And the divisors of any number are always less than or equal to this number divided by 2. There are no divisors greater than n over 2. So in this for loop, I'm going to test if we divide n by I, if the remainder is equal to 0, then I is a divisor for n. So I'm just going to display I end line, and that's it. Now let's test the program. Enter a number, so let's say 15, and we'll get that 1 and 3 and 5 are the strict divisors of 15. And if you want all the divisors of 15, we just need to see out n here. So let me run the program, and let's test it with 20. So we get all the divisors of 20, not only the strict divisors. In this video, we have to write a program to test if a given number n is a perfect number or not. A perfect number means that n is equal to the sum of its strict divisors. In the previous video, we made this program to find the strict divisors. So I'm going to use this code from the previous video up until this point where we printed the strict divisors. So I'm going to change this statement, and I'm going to add I to a variable sum, and I will define this variable here, and I'll initialize it to 0. So after the loop, all I have to do is to test if the sum is equal to the number itself, so this number will be a perfect number. I'll use the ternary operator, so I'll see out if the sum is equal to the number, then I'll print perfect, and if not, I'll print not perfect. So this is it. Let's test the program. So let's say number 6. Number 6 is a perfect number. Let's try it for number 5, for example. 5 is not a perfect number, so we get not. So if you are enjoying these videos, don't forget to share and like, and if you want to support me, you'll find a link to my Patreon account in the description. See you in the next video.